Yeah, everyone. Tonight I'm dragging out the Jeep 4.0 to get started on building the bottom end of this thing. Some of you are probably wondering, why are you working on a Jeep? Do you have a Jeep? The answer to that is no. This is going to be going into the Pacer. For some folks that don't know, the Jeep 4.0 is, well, it's Chrysler, but Chrysler bought Jeep, who also was AMC at one point, and the Jeep 4.0 is like the great-great-grandchild of the AMC 258 that was in the Pacer. So uses the same engine mount bosses, everything, bell housing mounts, it's all the same. It actually modernizes the engine quite a bit. We're going from a carburetor with a choke to just a regular old fuel injected multi-port EFI system. This will make it so my wife, when we get this car going, doesn't have to really be much of a car person to drive this thing. She doesn't have to pump the gas a bunch of times and flood it and pull a choke and deal with cranking and all that other BS. It should just light with one key hit just like any other car does. So at least that's the hope. So I'm kind of working my way through this. It's got new cam bearings in there. The guy who did the block actually is a dealer for engine tech parts, which is just all internal parts for engines. So I had him just set me up with the whole thing, just so that way I knew I had all the right bearings and rings. I'm going to be getting started on this. I'll try to take video as I go. Maybe set up the phone on a tripod and see if I can figure out how to do a time lapse or something. But you'll get to kind of watch me struggle, I guess. Tonight I'm back on the Jeep 4.0. So I'm going to probably put this on a time lapse. I might stop in between just to kind of explain what I'm up to. People have seen lots of engine builds on YouTube. I'm not really planning to do a tutorial. I'm just sort of feeling my way through and just kind of taking you along with me so you can see what I'm up to. And, you get to the end of the video, you got questions, feel free to leave me a comment or something down in the comments, and I'll take a look at it. Without further ado, here we go. well, I got them all the main bearing caps taken off. With that plastic gauge, it's just a little piece of wax. This stuff just wipes right off. Let's see if I can get the light. It's kind of hard to see. Let's see if I can find a good shot here. I know some people that follow car stuff have seen this before, but you can see how it smashed it down flat. It kind of pulled up on the end on that one when I pulled up on it. And you kind of missed a bit of a grown man throwing a bit of a freak outfit in here. Because it's measuring out at, how do you say that? It's like between 2000s and 0015. And I was like, oh no, it's too tight. But it's really actually within spec. Once I look in the book, it says the allowable is 001 to 0025. So it's a little on the tight side, which will probably actually help with oil pressure. You know, I guess the guy kind of got it dialed in pretty good, but basically you can see how I'm comparing to those lines that are on there. So all of them spec out at about the same. You know, I think I have 2 that are at 002 and all the rest are 0015. And really, I think the variation could be like if I got it oriented on the journal correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe her all off, and kind of running tight on time for tonight. So we'll see. I'll probably end up coming back out here tomorrow, and we'll do final install on the crank. I already put the seal, the rear main seal, in this cap here. You can see that black thing there that fits in. I've got the other half of it that needs to go down in here. So pull the whole crank out, wipe off all the stuff off the journals, make sure she's clean. I'll probably give it a good hose down with some brake clean. Make sure all these little holes are good. I don't know if anyone caught it in the time lapse, but ran into a little issue with this guy. It seems like the bolt will run in and out just fine when I don't have the cap installed. But as soon as I hammer the cap down, I think it's just pushing ever so slightly. But yeah, she goes down nice and smooth. Once the cap is in there, it just very lightly binds and kind of freaks me out. Another thing that I didn't talk about, so a couple of things I didn't talk about before I started this, I did off camera, was I actually thread chased to all these holes. So as I go, I'm thread chasing everything. So just making sure it's good and clean. I actually re-chased this one to make sure. At first I thought I saw some of the threads gnarred up on this. Like you can kind of see on camera when I turn it, it's like right in here. See that? I thought that was a gnar, but when you actually look up at it close, it's just a little discoloration right there. I don't think that's what's doing it. The thread chaser goes in okay. I cleaned it out, so everything seems to work as long as the cap isn't on. So another thing with these caps is if you look right here, there's this notch on both sides actually. And so before, I'm using the bolts when I put the cap in to kind of get everything lined up. And then once I've got it sitting on the journal, you saw me going around with a hammer and tapping it, I'm tapping the cap into this groove. And then I'm running the bolts down, then I'm torquing them. If you have the cap up on one of these or it's not quite seated correctly and I go and I torque that, I could crack a cap and then I'm in big trouble. So just kind of taking my time here tonight. Oh, the other thing I was going to mention. So before I put all these bolts in, I actually put a little bit of oil on every one of the threads and stuck them in. So you can still see some of the remnants of motor oil here. And the reason for doing that is just to make sure that when I'm torquing, this actually smooths out. Once it gets down past the cap, it's smooth and it's fine. But you want it to be a nice smooth pull when you're pulling it and torquing. Anyway, I'm going to shut her down for the night and come back and do final assembly tomorrow. We'll be doing assembly lube after we clean all this on everything and then torquing down all the caps, and then we're going to have this fully installed tomorrow night. But for now, I'm just going to sit here. So it's the next day. Actually, it's the day after the next day from where I left off. I was planning on coming back in here and putting the crank in and getting it locked down and moving on to pistons and rods, and then suddenly it occurred to me that there's a rather large part missing right here that runs the full length, and that is the camshaft. So I was thinking, well, I should probably get that in while I still have room to get my hands in there and kind of help guide it through all those little bearings so I don't nick any journals on the camshaft. Here's the camshaft. It just came with the Engine Tech kit. It says Engine Pro, part number AMC 1929, in case anyone's curious. But it should just be a stock grind camshaft, really nothing special. So yeah, so we'll just get this thrown in there real quick and get it good and lubed up first before we start getting it in there. And you'll see me in the time lapse trying to carefully work this thing in there without nicking anything. If the time lapse actually makes it into this video, you'll see it looks like it was super fast. I actually took a little bit of time getting that in there. You want to be really careful when you're sliding this in. You don't want to nick any of the journals, which are these fatter parts that ride on the bearings. And you got, cam lobes you're trying to work through there very carefully. It's like awkward, and then it's also heavy because it's solid steel, and it's just kind of rough. So it's in there. I've basically doused the hell out of it with assembly lube. It spins freely. I mean, it spins gooey, I guess, is the best way to put it. That, in case you didn't notice that, this assembly lube is super gooey. You'll see it later, but it's made to stick to the parts until startup. So that way it doesn't sling off or drip off. A lot of engine builders just use motor oil when they're putting stuff together, and that makes sense. The only issue with it is I don't know how long this engine's going to sit until I finally get around to first startup and break in. And I'd like the lube to be stuck in there until I actually do. Motor oil tends to slowly drip away because it's thinner viscosity. So that's where we're at with the camshaft. I'll get everything rearranged here, and we'll get back to installing the crank. All right, it's finally crankshaft time. Sit back, relax. We'll put on the time lapse and kick on the tunes.